So, but Hirosen closed, right?
Yeah, but the same guy is running it.
No.
The same guy who was cooking the food bought it.
You're
So
kidding.
Matsu,
So
yeah.
you're still going?
Oh yeah, the food has not changed a bit.
Oh my
It's
God.
still incredible.
Thank you for telling
Yeah,
me because
no,
I
it's
wanted
still
to ask you
incredible.
what your go-to is these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, no, no,
Because
no. That's a good one. I just set my timer for my
oh,
for my
for your car.
yeah,
Good idea.
yeah.
So what's your other go-to besides Hirosen?
Hiruzen, I go to Hiruzen. Well, it's now called
But not Matsuhisha. You go to Matsuhisha.
Matsumoto.
Oh, Matsumoto. Okay.
Matsumoto is what it's called now. I go there. That's kind of my spot.
Because I saw on your Instagram that you're a self-proclaimed Japanese food
Well,
enthusiast.
I like that stuff, and I have some really good Japanese friends
Mm-hmm.
that I met in New York, and through them, people in Japan
Mm-hmm.
who have kind of brought me along and taught me a lot of the stuff, and took me to the places to get some of the gear to cook Japanese food
So
and
you
stuff
you
like
cook it
that.
yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Look,
Wow.
some simple stuff, like real simple, like
Sashimi,
home style sashimi and stuff like that. I
a
haven't.
little yuzu and a little ponzu
Yeah,
sauce. And
exactly. Yeah,
wow. So
all
you
of
got
that
the
stuff.
knives going and
I
all of
did
that.
buy like a basic sushi knife, and it's much better than hacking through
Yeah.
yellowtail with the with
And
the.
the best is when you have friends who go out fishing and get the fresh fish,
Well,
right?
I don't have any fish quite that
I'll
fresh,
hook
but
you up.
Santa Monica seafood is really good.
Yes.
They've got
Very
great fish
good.
there. So.
That's awesome. So,
Mhm.
do you remember when the first time was that you ate Japanese? Because in
Oh yeah.
Germany, we didn't grow up with that. We
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have
No,
it.
I didn't either. I had moved out of Chicago into New York. I think I was 21.
Yeah.
And it just started playing with Miles, and a friend took me. But even before then, I think the same friend took me to a Japanese restaurant in Chicago when she was living in Chicago in school.
Uh
So I
huh.
must have been a teenager. But I
Okay.
didn't really. I think I had cucumber rolls or something like
Yeah.
that. Nothing too.
California rolls. Have you
Yeah.
been to Sushi Park up on
No.
Sunset? Oh, that's a
No.
good one.
No. No.
He's very traditional. They
Okay.
say in the entrance, no California
Yeah. Right.
roll, no
Right. Yeah. I
nothing.
can dig that.
It's
I
really
like that
good.
kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
know who sits there once in a while is Mick Fleetwood.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. Okay.
So it's an omakase.
Oh,
So
really? You just sit
yeah,
down.
you
Yeah.
should check it
The
out.
omakase at Matsumoto is
Is
incredible.
it? When are we going?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's call him right now.
Yeah.
Cater
Right.
in.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No. He's doing
So
great
you
food.
grew up in Chicago all your childhood and teenage years and
Yes.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't move to New York until I was 21, 22. Around 21, basically, I was there most of the time.
Uh-huh. And did you start playing music when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, yeah. I started. My father was not a professional drummer, but he, practiced at home,
Mm-hmm.
and so he started teaching me drums. I think I must have been 7,
Mm-hmm.
and then I saw a friend play in a talent show when I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him play a guitar. I didn't even know the difference between a bass and a guitar at the
Mm-hmm.
time, but I decided then. I mean, it really hit me like I'm going to be a musician after I saw that show.
At like
At
9.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and did you tell your dad?
I did. He was. My parents loved music, and there was always, some jazz playing or some soul music playing in the house,
Nice.
or both.
Uh-huh.
And so it was, he was glad to, that I became a musician, in any regard,
Yeah.
drums, bass, whatever.
But that moment when you saw that guy on the guitar
Hmm.
made you want to switch to a different instrument?
Yeah, yeah.
What was it? That the feeling or
I think, well, I was kind of a quiet kid, a bit shy. And I think it was the fact that the curtains opened and there was this, all of the guys, they were older than me, but I knew all of them through this neighbor, this guy
Okay.
who lived a couple of doors down. I didn't know that they were musicians. They had been musicians. They had been practicing in secret.
Okay.
And so the curtains open and there's this band, and I know the guys.
Uh-huh.
And it must have also been the response of the audience because it was like a elementary school talent show.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were people twirling batons and tap dancing, and then suddenly there's a band. And the response from the crowd must have also kind of made like something clicked in my head and went, "That's a way."
What
You
were they
know,
playing? Were they playing
just to
rock or?
it was kind of a neighborhood song. It wasn't
Hmm.
even a song from the radio. It was just something that they had,
They made it up.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where that song came from. I did a gig in Chicago. I've been working on a documentary,
Oh, wow.
and I did a gig in Chicago that was filmed for the documentary. And somebody from my neighborhood yelled, "Play Danger," which was the song
Uh-huh.
that they played and that we played. My brother and I started a band, and the next year we played that same song in the talent
What
show.
did your brother play?
He played guitar.
Did he also become a musician?
He did for a while.
Yeah,
For a while, yeah. I mean, he still fools around with it, but he didn't.
but not as a profession.
No, no, he didn't.
What do you think was the difference between you and him that you kind of continued and he?
Well, one of the main things that he says is that the guy, Angus Thomas, who lived a couple of doors down, was a little bit closer to his age.
Uh-huh.
So Angus would tell me to do something, and I would just do it because I wanted to learn how to play. And you know, he was not. He could be a little bit tough sometimes, but he couldn't really be that tough with my brother because my brother was more friends with him, and they were. He's older, but they were a little bit closer in age, and so it was just a
So
different.
you were the younger kid and
Yeah.
you would say, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Wow. And did you take lessons?
I took lessons from him. I decided that day that I saw him play that the next time I saw him, I would ask him to teach me to play.
But first you had to ask your dad to get you a guitar, right?
No, there was
No?
already a guitar in the house. My
Oh.
mother had bought a guitar, like just a little acoustic guitar, kind of Sears and Roebuck kind of thing.
So guitar was the first, but then when did
Well,
the bass come?
I didn't. I think it was a few months after I started learning on that instrument. He just said we're going to ignore the high two strings. I didn't know the difference between a bass guitar. I didn't know there was a bass guitar. I knew that there was a stand-up bass.
Yeah.
And I guess I might have even realized that it only had 4 strings. I don't even remember that much, about that at the time. But I do remember asking him to teach me to play the guitar. And he said, "I don't play the guitar, I play the bass." And I said, "Well, I want to learn how to play the bass then." And so that's actually the story of how I got to be a bass player.
Wow. And you played the drums before, and that goes
Well,
together as a rhythm section, kind of.
That's true.
I
Yeah, no,
mean,
definitely. In fact, my father, in teaching me, we didn't even have a drum kit at that time. It was just a practice pad. And he taught me to read music and, read rhythm, which
Yeah.
is the biggest part of reading,
Right.
reading music. So, I got a good basic background from my father before I even started playing.
And a
bass.
lot of support, too,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is
Oh, yeah.
wonderful.
No,
Because,
absolutely. Yeah,
usually parents, when they're not that open to the arts, they would
That's
say,
true.
learn something that could make
Yeah.
you a career
Yeah,
or something.
yeah,
So you had the
yeah.
freedom to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had a lot of support. I never would have been able to do what I did.
And it's
if I
amazing
hadn't.
that you knew at such a young age, this is what I want to do. This
Yeah.
is how I want to
Yeah.
spend my life.
Yeah.
And you did it.
Yeah. I was really sure that day. I remember that day very, very clearly. I was very sure.
And then you formed a band.
Yeah, my brother and I, I started playing, and about 6 months later, my brother started playing, and we hooked up with some other musicians in the neighborhood, and so 3rd grade I saw the band. 4th grade we were in the talent show that next year.
And then what did the talent show do? Did it get you new gigs, or how did you
Uh,
try to play in bars?
Well,
or-
no, I mean, I was.
You were young.
I was, I don't think I was 10 years old. So we didn't. I mean, the next gig we did after that talent show, my mother was a nurse, and there was a gig that she arranged for us to play at like the Nurses Association up on the west side of Chicago, and that was kind of it. We just rehearsed until the next talent shows, and I guess we played the talent show 4th grade, 5th grade. I was in a different band in 6th grade. My brother and I had kind of broken off, and he had the band that he was playing with. I had the band that I was playing with. I don't know whether we played in the talent show that year. We just practiced a lot.
Did you write your own music then, or
Not
did you
so
guys
much. No,
do
no, no.
covers?
We were trying to play the music of the time, Ohio Players, and I remember we played Pinball Wizard. The Who tune from the
Yeah.
musical Tommy, but just all stuff off the radio.
But would you say you were influenced a lot by the typical kind of landscape of the Chicago music? Because
Later on, yeah.
yeah.
When I started, maybe a few years later, I guess I was 14 or 15 when I started playing in clubs and stuff. So I played with, a few years after that, though, I played with a soul artist. I never played a lot of blues in Chicago, a little bit. But I played with a really great soul vocalist, a guy named Otis Clay, who was very much like Otis Redding. Really serious. I saw footage of him a couple of days ago, and it's like he was so bad. And I learned a lot about just playing what needs to be played and leaving out what doesn't need to be played.
Yeah, which is sometimes the more important thing, even, right?
Absolutely.
So interesting. Wow. So, what happened then?
So I went to this guy who taught me. He had graduated from grammar school or elementary school and gone to a high school that had a really, really great music program. And so I did the same.
So was it in the 70s, kind
This
of?
was in the 70s. I graduated elementary school in 75 and started, school at Chicago Vocational High School. They had an aeronautics department. There was, band, vocal,
Great.
orchestra. There was, it was a very big school. I think my freshman class was 1,200 students.
What?
And the school was about 4,500 students at that time.
And such interesting programs,
yeah.
because
It was
nowadays
yeah,
you don't find
no,
that anymore,
true,
which is
yeah,
such
yeah.
a shame. You
And
know?
the guy who was the director of the orchestra was also, he would have us go and do gigs, like political gigs or political luncheons and stuff like that. So a lot of times we would be doing professional gigs
Did
all
they pay
through high
you?
school. No. I bet he got paid because he was a bit of a mover
He was your
and shaker.
promoter.
He was a mover and shaker. He
Oh,
was a
yeah.
bit of a hustler, I guess.
Okay.
But he did provide a atmosphere in which I got about 3.5, 4 years of professional experience.
Yeah.
Before I
Early,
even,
yeah.
in those years, between 13 and 17.
Yeah, because I cannot imagine, like, what do? You play the instrument, you learn the craft, you refine it by practice. And then what? It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm applying for a job,
Yeah.
unless you're in a big band or
No.
whatever.
I mean, musicians we are our own agents in a way.
Yeah.
You play with a group of guys and somebody likes the way you play and they start talking about you, and the next time something happens, they're like, oh, let's go get that guy.
Yeah.
And that really is the way the music scene works and still works to a large extent.
Yeah, and a lot has to do also with who you are as a person, I think.
Absolutely.
Do you fit in? It's like, and I find that is the thin red thread in anything. If you work in a movie, wherever you're a team, creative team, you have to vibe with the people.
No, absolutely.
Right.
It's at least as important as your ability as a musician. We all know great musicians who don't have, adequate social skills, and they can get great gigs, but they have trouble keeping them.
Yeah.
And
Or even trouble keeping their bands.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true too. Yeah. So it takes knowing how to get along with people. But I had my parents I had really great. I was blessed with really, really great parents, and they gave me, all of the tools and more than I needed to kind of succeed.
That's amazing.
Wherever I went, whatever.
And
it
you
is
have one
that
brother, or you have more
I have
siblings?
One brother. Yeah.
And he's in Chicago still?
Yes.
Okay. So then you became your own agent. So after that little school band, like when was your first gig where you said like it was a paid gig?
Well, I started kind of playing around town with different people. There was a guy in Chicago who later became a really big local act. His name's Galib Galab. He was a really big act, and then he later went to Vegas and was a pretty good in terms of lounges. He wasn't like a headliner or anything like that, but he had a huge following among the lounges in all of the casinos.
And
In
what genre of music was he?
It was kind of electric jazz, maybe more. I don't want to say smooth jazz because it would have been before that, but like we were playing stuff like Grover Washington and the Crusaders and different things like
So
that.
that's when you kind of
Soul jazz, I guess you would call
started
it.
with jazz, more or less.
Well, since my dad was a musician and he listened to jazz, all of the bands that I played with, because there was the orchestra in high school, but there were also bands that I played with. Um, Generally with guys who were a little bit older than me, upperclassmen. I remember the first guy who asked me if I could play a walking bass line on an acoustic bass, and I said I think so. And so I played with them on and off for the next 6 or 7 years. Both in high school and then after I graduated. And I went away to music school for a year, and then came back and joined that same band, and we started working all over town.
Where did you go to music school?
Southern Illinois University. They had a pretty good music program there, and again, the guy who taught me from the beginning had gone there, and he said that it was a good place for me to get some more experience as a musician.
More like theory or music
Both,
theory?
both. I was in class a lot, but it's funny because at that time, I was much more interested in just being a musician.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really study, the other things, but I learned a lot. And after a year, I decided that okay, Carbondale's kind of a small town. I've done well here. Let me see if I can go and do that in Chicago. And basically, that's how I started playing around Chicago. I'd been playing around Chicago a little bit in high school with different people. I'd recorded with. I got called on a session with Pop Staples, who was the father of the Staple Singers. I got caught on a recording session with him. I think I was about 15 or 16 at that time.
That's correct.
So yeah, in high school is really where things started to kind of come together, and I guess people started to kind of recognize that that maybe I had a little bit of ability then. So I had opportunities to get out and play a bit more. Away for the year at school, I played a lot during that year, and came back and just got into the music scene. And it was a few years later. Let me see. I was 18 when I got back to Chicago. So when I was 21, one of the guys who I've been playing around town with was Miles Davis's nephew, and
Vince
Wilburn.
Yeah.
Vince Wilburn Jr. And he had been in Japan with Miles, and when he got back, he decided that he was going to make a change on the bass with his bass chair. So Vince called me and said, "Miles wants to hear you play over the phone."
Wow.
And I never did play over the phone for him, but that's how I flew to New York the next day and auditioned.
Wow.
And that's how all of the rest of the stuff happened, really.
So that cemented your serious music.
Well, I mean, I was
gigging.
pretty serious even before then, but that was because Miles Davis is such a respected figure, across all genres.
Yeah.
That
Hands down.
when I moved to New York while I was playing with him, I could get gigs in New York because people at least wanted to see, well, he's playing with Miles, but can he really play? And so I started working around the scene in New York and touring with Miles, Europe and Japan and the States and stuff.
And you were 21.
I was 21 when I started playing with Miles.
And that was like basically then you played mainly jazz? Or did you do sessions too?
It was electric jazz. I was doing
Yeah.
a few records here and there. When people ask me, were you a session musician? The guys who make records or who were doing that, there's not as much of that as now as there was then.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a home studio and does their own stuff, to a large extent. But I played on some, those guys they do thousands of records. I don't know if I'm probably on maybe a couple of thousand records after 35 years in the business. They do that many in a year, some of those guys, particularly then. Now, nobody's making, there's a few guys, a handful of guys that are doing records sessions, a few a week. But the guys who I've done some work with guys who were around L.A. in the 70s,
Like
and they
who?
would tell me, like Ray Parker Jr. and Wah Watson, Phil Upchurch, and those guys would be booked for 3 years
What?
just making records every day, and literally 2 or 3 sessions a day,
Wow.
and book for that. There's just not that kind of work now.
No,
You
why
know,
is that?
well, because record companies are
Yeah, the
are
whole
not.
landscape
It's
is
completely
completely
different now.
different.
You have streaming,
Yeah.
and people are not making money on records, and also record companies are also looking for young artists who have a million viewers on YouTube, or a million
Yeah. Sure.
followers on Instagram or something like that. They're looking for almost a built-in audience,
Yeah.
and they're looking for people who are young, who they can
I mean,
have a little bit more control
even
over.
if you look at Blue Note Records,
Mm-hmm.
I just watched that documentary about it. Have you seen it? It's
I haven't.
called Blue Note Records Beyond the Notes.
Oh, really?
And the director is actually a friend of mine, is a Swiss woman,
I
Sophie
see.
Huber. Shout out to Sophie.
Mm.
It's an incredible film because she tells the whole story of these German guys coming over to New York in the 30s and how they had no clue how to make a record, but they loved jazz so
Yes.
much that they had this burning desire to create this
Yeah.
label. And she really accomplished to draw you into that world.
Yeah.
And then, Don Was is who's
Right.
like running it now.
Yes.
He's talking about how all these hip hop artists are sampling jazz
Yeah.
now
No, no,
and
no. I
all
mean,
of
that
that.
was some of the most sampled music is
Yeah.
the stuff off of that label.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
But
stuff.
it was so great because he kind of is carrying on the ethos and that off that label, and I find that so wonderful.
No, no, no. It's really great. It's really great
That
to have someone who knows music
yeah,
and is not just an executive.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he's so deeply in it. Like that was one.
Absolutely.
Check this out. It's
I will.
actually
I will.
on.
It sounds great.
I think it's on Apple TV or
Okay.
something.
I will
It's
definitely take a
Blue
look at
Note Beyond,
Yeah.
and also the photography
Oh,
of
it's incredible.
all the
Yeah,
albums.
yeah.
Like
No, my dad had lots of those records, so I know Blue Note from from the time that
yeah,
that
and
I was.
and
I
you can
was
see it. Like if
yeah.
you see a Blue Note cover,
Yeah,
it's a
no,
Blue Note
absolutely,
record,
absolutely.
right?
It's very iconic. Yeah,
Yeah.
both musically and visually. You're
Yeah.
right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. And, also when I was reading or when I watched that documentary, I was kind of diving more into this jazz world because I found it so interesting because the communication between the musicians, I think, is so different than in any other genre of music.
Yeah, it does take it takes really big ears, and listening to jazz musicians listen to each other on a level that it really does approach recognizing each other's intention. It does really go a little bit past music to guys just being incredibly adept at listening to each other, and whether they comment on what the other is playing or whether they do the opposite of what the other is playing or whether they ignore purposely what the other is playing, there's all of this interplay that exists that is a direct result of people who have mastered their instruments, and mastered listening and mastered improvising. So it really is. It's kind of a triumphant of those three things and probably others.
And it's unpredictable too,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, because it's improvised. It's
yeah.
You're going into a situation and you're saying, okay, I think this fits there, and other guys, and everybody doing that together, which is pretty. That's it's some kind of. It takes a certain kind of. I don't know that you would say intelligence quotient, but
Oh yeah.
it definitely takes a certain kind of I don't No,
I would say
what you would
also
say?
a finesse and a presence
Yeah,
too, because you have to be in the moment, like
absolutely.
completely
Yeah,
present in order to, like in a
yeah,
conversation. I mean, you can
absolutely.
drift off and not listen, or
Yeah, because in a way, that's what it
it's a
is. It's a conversation.
conversation.
It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah, and I, though I have gone on and played, or I've always played more than just jazz music, but I will say that it really has helped me in terms of being able to go and play with other musicians, and to play what is needed. To play what is needed that suits the music. And not what necessarily, oh, I want to play what I practiced for the last 2 weeks. It's
Yeah.
not about that. It's about playing what the music is asking for, and trying to elevate that.
Yeah, and for that you have to be also able to, um, synthesize everything that comes together,
Absolutely.
right? It's
Absolutely.
yeah, because you have to be ready for conflict or for like anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a great. I always love. I mean, I love playing all kinds of music. When
Yeah.
I've been playing jazz, and I should make the distinction that I'm a little bit more of an electric jazz player. There's the acoustic guys that play acoustic piano, acoustic bass, and stuff like that. I don't play a lot of acoustic bass. I have one,
I was
and
just gonna ask.
I was taught how to play that instrument, but
It's so
you know,
beautiful,
it
the
is a really
acoustic bass.
great
I love
instrument,
it.
but it's very different. It's very different
Yeah.
from electric bass, and but having grown up in that discipline has really helped me. It has really helped me in all the endeavors and everything. You know, Miles used to say, "One art helps the other." So does playing different kinds of music, so long as you do not look down your nose at them. You will never learn how to play an idiom of music if you don't respect it.
Yeah,
You have to
absolutely.
try to look at it and try to find out what are the things that make this unique. And once you understand those things and learn to play in that idiom, then you'll be able to play that music, I think.
So did you also have conversations with Miles about it? I mean, like, verbal conversations, not musical ones.
Oh yeah.
When you would talk, was he like obsessed with music? That
Oh, he was. Well, I say it this way: I've met thousands and thousands of musicians over my lifetime, and I can't say that I've ever met anybody who loves music more than
wow.
he loved music. It was a constant. He was constantly, tinkering. I mean, he's the kind of guy who would. We play a 2.5 hour gig, and he'd go to his hotel room and listen to the gig 2 or 3 times before he went to sleep. So you would get calls at 4 a.m. Darryl, that thing you played last night, I want you to keep that. He was always working on it. He was always, or we'd be playing a tour. We'd do a tour, finish the tour. We'd be off for a few months. He'd call a rehearsal, and then take everything from you that you had learned, that you had figured out on the previous tour. Don't play that anymore. I want you to find something else, because he was pushing you
Yeah.
to find another way, because he was always trying to evolve. He was always pulling all of us with him.
But that's the way to move forward, not to
Absolutely.
stay in the comfort zone and
Absolutely.
just kind of,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, because
yeah,
then it becomes
yeah.
just like
No, no,
a
no. Yeah,
repeat,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's why
yeah.
they call him the Picasso of
No, no, no.
jazz,
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
he's got
mean,
all these different periods,
yeah,
just as Picasso did. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And also was like constantly working. Like
Yeah,
Picasso was always like, I've got to go to work.
yeah.
But because I learned that from, reading those biographies or something. It really is sometimes you think, oh, I need to take this course or go to this school or something. No, just do it.
Yeah,
Just get to
yeah,
work,
yeah.
right?
No, absolutely.
Practice and do
Yeah.
all of these things.
Yeah, playing is the best practice for playing,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then you also played with Branford Marsalis, right?
Well, I played with Branford in Sting's band. When
How did that happen? Like, did Sting just one?
Well, basically, I met Branford on a Miles Davis session, and
Was he on the
yeah,
saxophone?
he played saxophone on this session. He wasn't in the band with Miles at the time, but Miles, he was kind of Branford was a young new phenom,
A new cat.
and and Miles, of course, had heard about him and called him to play on this record. It was actually the first record that I'm on with Miles Davis, a record called Decoy.
Mm-hmm.
And so Branford and I, kind of got to be friends, and he met Sting at some point after we worked on this record together, this Miles record together. And Sting told him, "Hey man, I'm leaving the police, and or
Oh,
I've
that was
left
just
the
about
yeah,
that in the
that was-
80s.
I've left
Yeah.
the police, and I'm going to put together a new band, and I want like young jazz players, and I'm not going to play bass. I'm going to play guitar." And Branford went, "Oh, well then if you're not going to play bass, I know the perfect guy. Darryl. Should get Darryl." We worked together on Miles Davis's record,
Amazing.
and so that's basically how that happened.
And that was The Dream of the Blue Turtle.
Exactly.
That was such a beautiful album.
Yeah, there's some great stuff there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there's some great stuff. I saw Sting recently. In fact, I
You
saw
did
the
a
play.
theater play.
Yeah,
Did
I went
you
and
go?
saw. I went
How
and saw,
was it?
It was beautiful. It was
Yeah,
really
I
really
missed
beautiful.
it.
It's loosely based on his life.
Yeah,
He grew up in Newcastle, which is a
Yes.
shipbuilding town,
yeah.
and so it's about that industry and what happened when that industry left that area, and it's a play about that. And so some of the songs that you've heard that he wrote are in the play, as well as a bunch of other songs that he wrote specifically for the play. And he's an incredible composer, incredible lyricist.
And he also always moves forward.
Yes,
He never
yes.
stands still.
Yeah,
I like that
yeah.
about him.
Yeah, he has a way of taking elements from other kinds of music and kind of making them his own.
Yeah.
If you think about the Police, rock and roll, ska,
Yeah, reggae,
punky,
a little
the punk
punk,
thing
yeah.
a little bit, but it ends up he's able to take elements from those things. It's the same thing he did with the Brazilian thing, with songs like
Yes.
Fragile, and so he's very good at taking elements of these different kind of genres and bringing what he does to them and creating
Make it
like
his
almost a
own.
third, another thing or another genre.
So basically, you guys were the first band for Sting then when
Yeah.
he went solo.
Yeah, when he went solo, we were in that first band.
And how long did that last?
That lasted
tour,
yeah, we did a world tour, but it was a big tour.
I saw
We went
that tour.
everywhere.
I
like, you
love
know.
that. Was Dominic Miller in the band?
No.
already?
This
Not
was
yet.
long before
Okay.
then. This is when Sting was actually playing guitar. He
Right.
played guitar in the band, and so it was me and Branford Marsalis, Kenny Kirkland, the dearly departed Kenny Kirkland, Branford Marsalis, Omar Hakim, Dolette McDonald, Janice Pendarvis. We were all in that band together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know Abe Laboriel Jr.?
I do.
The
yes.
drummer?
Yeah, we've
Because
played together a bit. Yeah.
He's awesome, right?
He is awesome. Yeah, he's a
Because
great
he
musician.
played for Sting too, I think.
Did he?
But that was
Oh,
later.
Oh yeah,
He's
if it
with
was,
McCartney
it was
now.
yeah. If it was,
He's a
was
great
much
guy
later,
and a great player.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. I agree.
So when was your crossover? That was kind of your bridge to rock and roll a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
If
that,
you can call it that.
Yeah,
but
exactly, because it was.
It's so
it was
stupid to kind of
yeah, that's true.
compartmentalize
Yeah,
music.
yeah,
I
yeah.
find the genre
Yeah.
thing. I've
But-
never been a big fan of genre
No.
defining.
It's good. There's good music, and there's
Exactly.
music I don't like.
Oh, people say, yeah, what kind of music do you like?
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah, no.
I like
good
music.
I like
Good music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and I realized at the time it was like the kind of electric jazz world knew me, and but I didn't really, I really wasn't known in the rock or the rock and roll set, and so the Sting gig was a chance for me to move over into that.
Did you
world.
want that? Did
I
you
did.
want to? Do you wanted to explore it,
I
or
did.
in terms of playing, or the whole?
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. I mean, I'm always up for a challenge musically, and physically, my legs are burning right now. But also, I saw it as a way of increasing, the playing field for myself. I thought that it would be great because I really became a musician because I didn't want to do the same thing every day.
Yeah.
And so that would go to, I also don't want to play the same kind of music every day. And I was going to say earlier, when I have been playing rock and roll for a few months, and then I go to a jazz gig, it's so refreshing to me. It's so I get so much joy, um, and vice versa. When I've been playing, jazz for a while, or electric jazz, or whatever, jazz rock, whatever you want to call it, and then I go back into the world of rock and roll, I also really love the irreverence of rock and roll. That not everything has to follow certain rules. That you break the rules. That's part of the whole thing of rock and roll. It's yeah, I love that. I feel very blessed to
Yeah.
be one of the musicians who kind of gets to move around
Yeah.
a bit and do different things. That's made
Is
my
that
life
still the
much more
case
interesting.
now in your
Yeah,
career? So
yeah,
you do when you're
yeah.
not on the road, like let's say,
Yeah. I
with
mean, and even
that
now
little
I'm kind of
band.
moving into my own music
I was going to ask you
recording
that.
and performing on my own music. That's what the documentary really is kind of
So
about.
tell me a little bit more about that documentary.
Well, there's a filmmaker named Eric Hamburg who was I believe he was a co-producer on two films with Oliver Stone, Any Given Sunday, which is a football movie,
Yes.
and the Nixon movie. Um, anyway, I met him through a trainer. I think it was actually through a physical trainer, that a guy that I was boxing guy that I worked out with. Um, a friend of his came back to me and said, "Listen, this guy wants to meet you. He's talking about wanting to do a movie." And the original idea was, I want to do a musician movie like Any Given Sunday, which is like a behind the scenes football movie. He said, but first we'll do like a documentary. And so we started filming, and we got interviews from all of the Stones and lots of musicians that I played with, some of the people that I grew up with in Chicago, my brother, and and so we're basically, and filmed a couple of gigs, that I did in Chicago to kind of, bring that whole thing home. And we're finishing it up. Hopefully, it'll be finished this year.
What is it going to be called? Do you know?
We don't have a
What's the
title
working
yet.
title?
We don't know yet.
But it's you're the center of it.
Yeah, it's about my life and
The
career.
entire
Growing
life.
up in Chicago in the 60s and 70s, the
Amazing.
black movement, you know, growing up in a household where my dad was playing jazz music or listening to jazz music. My mom was listening to soul music. My mom, there was a period there when I was pretty young. It was probably, some of it was before I started playing, where my mom took us to see James Brown every time. Anytime he was playing at a place where she could take children, she took us to see him.
Amazing.
So I had I was really lucky with that.
Yeah.
My parents really.
Sounds like it. I love documentaries. I can't wait to see it. We have to time this with this.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Did you see the Quincy documentary, Quincy Jones?
Yes, there have been two. There's the.
I just saw the one his daughter did.
Oh yeah, the recent one. The recent one. I've seen that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
I mean, that
he's
life,
Yeah, he's had an amazing run.
Sinatra, and like the times he grew up, like unbelievable.
Yeah, and again,
body of work.
Again, his training was in jazz.
Yeah.
And his ability to move that over to these, to these artists, like, I guess it was Peggy Lee first or something like that, or
I don't know.
yeah,
I don't remember.
These boots were made for walking. I think he's done like, he had a bunch of pop hits.
Yeah.
15, 20 years before Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
So he's another one who is highly respected by jazz musicians.
And
but also,
scored, too.
Yeah, no,
He
scored films.
scored.
The Pawnbroker.
Yeah.
He did an incredible job on The Pawnbroker.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who is also moved in these different areas. He's very, like I said, very well respected in jazz, but he produced the greatest, perhaps the greatest pop record, Thriller, ever recorded.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he's still going strong.
No,
if you
absolutely.
think about it, but that's the thing, what you said, like you never stand still, you move around and keep it fresh, and it's good for the whole being,
No,
not
absolutely.
only like your musical skills and styles, but also for the brain and
Yeah.
opening the mind
No, no, no.
and all of
Absolutely.
that.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, he's like, and
Mm.
so I've been watching these documentaries lately. Have
Mm.
you, or do you know this guy? What is his name? Clarence Avant?
I don't know Clarence Yvonne. I wish I did.
I wish too. What a great
You
guy.
know, that documentary is
How good was
incredible.
that?
Incredible. He's a real force
I
in
know.
this town, and just in the in the movie, film, television. He's
Everywhere.
yeah,
But he
he's a real
seems like
force.
this. I mean, The Godfather always has like this kind of bad
Connotation, but
like
no, yeah,
connotation. But I find his intentions were so, he just wanted to help everybody.
yeah,
And if you then
absolutely.
learn about his background and
Hmm.
how he got started, it's like,
Yes,
you know, why? It's like paying it forward. It's such a noble, beautiful thing. And it just like animates out of every cell of this guy,
you're absolutely right.
right? Yeah. So, you going on tour?
I think
What's going on with the coronavirus there? Like,
we'll see, man. I guess time will tell. I hope so. I hope that it
I
happens.
hope so
Hopefully this.
too. They just said on the radio that they're going to push Coachella back to the fall.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. I
Europe
suspect
is
that.
completely like
Yeah, yeah. It looks like they're shutting things
shutting
down in
down.
Europe.
Italy's shut down.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah. So yeah, I don't. It's difficult to know where the caution begins and the hype ends.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult to know right now. But I would imagine that in the next 10 days or 2 weeks, it
You
should be
will-
pretty clear
yeah.
what's going to happen.
Yeah. So how many years have you already been with the Stones?
I've been playing with the Stones since November of '93. So what is that? 27 years,
Mhm.
just under 20. I'm in my 27th year, I think.
You had your 25th anniversary already.
Yeah, yeah.
Because when I first met them, there was Bill Wyman was still around.
right,
That was
yeah.
on the Steel Wheels tour.
Right, that was his last
When
tour.
Jay wrote me a letter with a typewriter in the snail mail, I still have it.
Yeah,
You know,
wow.
with the
Look at that.
yeah. I mean, we lived in
Yeah,
those times
that's
and,
right,
and mailed
yeah.
it, and it's like, I'm coming to Germany.
You're right. Wow. Which city are you from?
I'm from Stuttgart.
Oh, okay.
But at the
Okay.
time, I was living in Munich. So when they
Uh-huh.
first came, I just moved to Munich. I still had my boxes in my apartment. And she
really?
called me and she's like, come over to the Four Seasons. We're having a little party. It's like Ronnie and Charlie's birthday, I think.
Oh, right. Yeah, day after.
And
yeah.
and I went over there and I thought, they wouldn't be there. And then I was like, is this
Yeah,
really
yeah,
happening?
right,
It's like,
yeah.
meet Keith. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, holy shit. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
Did you meet Bill?
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes,
of
yes.
course.
I met him first in England when we played England the first time at Voodoo Lounge, the Voodoo Lounge tour.
Yeah. Was
He
that 93?
backstage. That was '94.
4.
That was '94.
So that's when I met you then on
yeah,
Voodoo Lounge.
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah, we were in Toronto rehearsing, I think. Yeah. Were you
Did
in
you
Toronto
play?
then?
No, I wasn't. But did
You were here.
Yeah, I was. No, I was still living in Germany. I
Oh,
moved here in
okay.
'96, but I remember I went to Amsterdam when they did the club gig for that
Oh right. Yeah.
stripped album
Paradiso. Yeah.
at the Paradiso.
Yeah. I just saw some footage from that.
That was
Somebody
such a great time.
watching that. That was a great time. Yeah. Pretty heavy.
Don
days.
Wass was there
Yeah.
and Ed.
Yeah. Ed Sheeran, God rest him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what a beautiful soul.
Really sweet
Yeah.
guy, and just a giant
Yeah,
in the music, in the music field.
I know.
I've seen him do things that were, pretty amazing. Like put together, I did a recording session in Brazil using a bunch of musicians from Chicago, like Chicago soul meets Brazilian bossa nova, a record that a really good friend of mine, Robert Abear, produced. There were 40 and 50 tracks, all this different stuff that was recorded, and Ed mixed it and made sense of it, and did a stellar job of putting those things together. That's when I really realized what kind of real magic man he was with
Yeah.
sound,
Because it's like an extension of the music, like
Yeah.
what you said, to always keep it fresh and do
Yeah.
different styles, and that also is in the
Yeah, no,
in the
he's
control room.
Yeah, no,
it's
he's
the
a
same
musician.
thing.
He's
yeah,
he's part of the
Yeah.
part of the thing that that needs to happen to make music to make it all work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my earliest memory of meeting you
Yeah.
was Amsterdam. That
Yeah.
was so
Right.
much fun, and I remember that they were filming it too.
Yeah. Right. That's right.
And the
Yeah.
first day they said they looked at the footage, and these guys were actually Austrian, these two
Oh,
guys.
really?
And I worked with them too at
Oh,
my
wow.
job at the time because we produced a music show for German television called Jam,
I see.
Jeans and Music. And then they said, we need a better looking audience and stuff. And then they said, hey, Jay and Andrea, you go out and find some good looking
Oh,
people.
really? Wow.
So Shelley Lassar, God bless her,
Yes, indeed.
gave
She's
us
another one.
100 tickets, and we
Wow.
walked around. I wish we had footage of that
Yeah.
because we're like, oh, this one looks good. Like, hi, would you like to come see the Rolling Stones tonight? Some people were just like, no.
Yeah, right.
And some people were, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
And some
right.
people were freaking out.
Of
So
course.
it was the best job I ever had.
That's pretty good. I mean,
It
that's
was a
Stones tickets. Yeah, that's not a
for
bad
free
gig. Yeah, that is a good job.
at a club gig.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a good job.
That
Yeah,
was a good
yeah,
job.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did they find you?
I,
This is job interview, like
it's funny
in a
because
music magazine.
a friend of mine who ran a jingle company, owned a jingle company in Chicago. I was doing jingles with him. He called me. I guess that would have been May of 1993. He said, "Hey man, I hear Bill Wyman is leaving the band, leaving the Stones." And I was like, "Bill Wyman's been leaving the band for years." And he said, "No, I think it's really happening this time." And I remember just kind of holding the phone. And he said, "Should I get mixed like management's number for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so. That probably be a good idea." So he called me back a few minutes later, and I called, and I think I spoke to. Do you know Victoria Pearman? She now helps Mick with the film company.
Okay.
I think it was her that I talked to that day
Really?
in his office. It was it was Mick Jagger's management's office. I think she was there. And she picked up the phone and I
Not
said,
Prince Rupert.
"Yeah, but I mean
Yeah, the whole-
that it was part of that, that whole scene." But I said, "I heard that Bill Wyman is leaving. If there's going to be a list of guys, I'd love to get on the list to be heard." So that was,
Good for you.
and she said, "I'll take your number, and it probably won't happen for a while, but I'll take your number." And a few months later, they called.
Who called you?
I don't remember who it was.
Some management person.
Somebody called and said we'd like to have you come out and audition in New York.
New York.
And so I flew to New York and auditioned.
Where were you living, in Chicago?
I was living 93. I was living in Chicago then. Yeah. I was just moving. I was about to move. I moved to L.A. right before I started recording Voodoo Lounge in November of '93. So yeah, I was preparing to move back to L.A. Yeah, I went and auditioned and played, a bunch of tunes with them, and then they left New York and Mick and Keith left New York and went to Barbados or some island and wrote the music for Voodoo Lounge. And then I was back. That happened in May. In October, they had me back to play through some of the songs that they'd written. And it was then that they asked me to record with them. And
Where did you record Voodoo
we
Lounge?
record-
Here, right?
No. That was recorded in Ireland,
Really?
in Dublin. Yeah, we recorded that. The basic tracks were done in Ireland. They came back and started working on it here in January of
I
'94.
remember that when they all set up
Yeah.
like
And
in
so-
all different hotels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I had done all the the basic tracks, but I was just hanging out, with them. And one day, Keith said, "Hey man, did you see Charlie? He just left. Did you see him before he left?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, he asked me." He says, "Well, Keith, we auditioned all those bass players, and we've recorded the record with Darryl. Are we going to ask him to go on tour with us?" And Keith said, "Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, we've done all this recording with him, and auditioned all these guys and chosen him." So, and Charlie said, "Don't you think we should tell him?" And so Keith said, "So I'm letting you
Great
know that we
idea.
want you to go. We want you to go on tour with us." And that was like January of '94.
How did that feel? Did you
That was great.
expect it,
I had
or
hoped
you
so.
had?
I had hoped so.
I would
Yeah,
have
I had
too,
hoped so. Yeah,
probably.
that I hope that when I was recording Voodoo Lounge, I was like, I'm just trying to get in the door here. I'm just trying to get in the door. And when we listened back to what we had, I was like, well, I don't imagine that they would go and hire somebody else. Not after auditioning all those guys. So yeah, they auditioned a dozen guys,
I
15
wonder,
guys.
did you ever find out who was like
Oh yeah,
in
yeah. No,
the?
there were a lot of great players.
Uh-huh.
Joey Spampanato,
Mm-hmm.
Hutch Hutchinson.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Darryl Johnson
Mm-hmm.
from the what you call it brothers, not the Meters, but the um, Neville brothers.
Neville
Yeah, there were a lot
Brothers.
of they listened to
Oh my
like the
God.
top of the bass world
Yeah.
at the time. There were a lot of great players. It could have gone to very easily could have gone to Hutch Hutchinson. Very easily could have gone
Mm-hmm.
to Joyce Pompanato. It could have gone to there were a lot of great players who came in and
How did
played.
that feel though when you got it? Were you like making a happy dance or
Oh yeah,
something like
oh
that?
yeah. No, it was pretty big. It's really weird because I had been really blessed to work with Miles,
Mm-hmm.
and that opened the door for a lot of everything else that happened.
Yeah.
Pierre even told me that says you were already on the list because you'd met Mick when you filmed the movie with Sting on the Dream of the Blue Turtles movie, or what's the name of that movie?
Oh, Bring on the
Bring on the
Night.
Night.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And so when I met Mick at that
What did Mick
audition,
have to do with
he
that?
just came
Oh,
to
he
see.
just hung
He was in
out.
Paris and he came and
Hmm.
saw the gig.
In that beautiful
Yeah,
house.
and yeah. But
Or
the gig happened at the
chateau.
Mogador Theater
Yeah.
in Paris, and so he came to the gig
Uh-huh.
and came in the dressing room, introduced himself. It was like, shit, Mick Jagger. And but he doesn't forget anything. So
Yeah.
when we met at the audition, he says, "Remember we met in Paris?" And I said, "Yes, of course, I remember." But the Miles thing, if you play with Miles Davis, it's almost like it just
It's
opens
so
doors.
it's so
People,
iconic.
yeah, and he's so
It's
well respected,
oh yeah.
and all of the musicians that have played with him are have gone on to do great things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of expected that he chooses guys who go on to do really cool other things. And so it really kind of labeled me with that. And so you know in a business where you sometimes a great player can't even get an audition,
Yeah.
it helped me get the audition. And so if I could get an audition, at least I could be heard.
Yeah.
And so that has really opened the door for quite a lot of, really great things. So the thing with the Stones was kind of like it keeps happening to me. It's like the Miles Davis and Sting and then
Yeah.
Herbie Hancock and then Peter Gabriel. All these things kept kind of happening. So it was it was like I was doing the happy dance, but it was almost like the Miles thing. I kept thinking to myself, man, I really got blessed.
Yeah. That's
That
what
that
why I said it cemented it
it
kind of,
did.
because I mean, how much bigger can you go
Yeah,
in that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like considering that Keith or I think Mick also are very inspired, or were very inspired by blues too.
Yes.
You're a Chicago cat
Yeah,
and
yeah,
blues and stuff. Did you
yeah.
talk about those things while you were recording the first time?
Yeah, yeah. I remember Mick actually asking me, "Hey man, who did you play with before Miles?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "I played with a guy named Phil Upchurch." And he went, "Oh, I know Phil Upchurch. Phil Upchurch played on Da 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 by, Howlin' Wolf and Da 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 by Muddy
Yeah.
Waters." And I mean, he played bass and guitar and stuff. So that's who you played with. So, that probably, I imagine that would have helped my,
Yeah.
my bona fides, I guess is,
Of course.
and so, yeah, that probably didn't hurt.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in the documentary, everybody's saying it was Charlie who decided because Darryl played jazz, and then Charlie's interviewed in the documentary, and he says, actually, I just liked the way he played,
Good.
and he was, he was somebody that I felt like I could get along with, or we could get along with.
But that is a typical Charlie
Yeah,
answer, huh?
exactly,
It's like
exactly.
nailed it.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. I love playing with him. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And people don't realize how funny he is. He's got
Oh
a
yeah.
great dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
And just a really sweet man, really
Yeah.
lovely guy.
Amazing. Amazing. So it's still going.
Yeah,
27
it
years
continues.
later.
Yeah.
Because where could you go from there?
Well, I want to do some stuff on my own. That's what I'm, kind of moving
yeah,
into.
I like that.
I started building guitars and basses
You
a few
did?
years ago. Not building, but I designed some stuff, and like I'm kind of in the middle of trying to get that business off the ground.
Oh, cool. Do you work
And,
with some manufacturer
yes.
that is already
Yeah.
making basses and
Yes,
stuff?
exactly, exactly. But more than like a big company, I'm working with builders. Builders.
Nice.
I started with a guy named John Carruthers, who I met. I took a course. I took a guitar building course,
Wow, how interesting.
and so he was the head of the department at the time. So I built this instrument, and I said, "Wow, I want to build more. I want to have him build more." So I took it to him, and he said, "Well, you went on tour, so you weren't able to finish class. Why don't you come out to my shop in Camarillo and help me build it, see what goes into it, and then you can decide if it's something that you want to go into." So we did that, and I've actually been playing that bass that he built with the Stones on Miss You for the last 7 years,
Wow.
6, 7 years, yeah.
What's special about that one?
It is
particular?
just, it's very much I grew up playing Fender instruments, so it's very much a Fender type instrument. It's just a few little changes, little things that I like that, maybe they were doing on earlier Fender instruments that they're no longer doing. So things that I've, kind of, grabbed onto that I think, it's kind of trying to put your finger on the pulse of what you think musicians will respond to.
Right.
And so,
And
since I've
the
been
learning process of building them is a beautiful
Well,
extension
no,
of
it's
the.
great. And when I was in class, sanding and figuring out all of these things,
Yeah.
I would get lost. It was a 4-hour class, 4 hours every night, or at 4 hours twice a week. And I would literally, at the end, it was 6 to 10 o'clock would come so quickly. And that's one of the things that let me know that this is something that I really love doing.
Yeah.
Because
When time goes away, you know it.
Yeah. So I really do love it.
And beginner's mind again too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true too. You have a different outlook. You have
Yeah.
a different perspective. And I also am interested in music education in schools. So, once we're up and going, we'll be gifting some schools, and we'll,
Nice.
join with some coalition that's trying to get music education and arts back into schools
Yeah.
to help support that kind
so
of thing. Because I
sad.
learned how to play
In school.
and
Yeah.
in public school,
I
not
did
like a
too.
private, like a public school that had this great music program, and there were always great people around me. This guy that I'm telling you taught me. I was his first student. It just happened that he ended up being a really, really great teacher, who taught me how to teach myself in a way, And he lives in Austria, by the way.
No way.
Now, yeah.
Wow. It's so sad that the arts are disappearing, and I always find, the arts is everything, It's
Yeah.
like what Winston Churchill said,
No, yeah.
Do you know Flea personally?
Not personally, but
Yeah.
I've met him a few times. I
Yeah,
think he's great. He's got a great school. I hear.
Yeah, he's got the Silver Lake Conservatory of
Yeah.
Music, where they, make it affordable for underprivileged communities, and they give instruments. So maybe you should
Yeah,
hook
I
up
love
with
that.
them.
I love that he's
Fellow
that he's
bass
doing that.
player.
Yeah, I love that he's
Awesome
doing that.
human being
Yeah.
too.
No,
and
he's
a badass.
a very special guy. Yeah.
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 So I've been going to they always do a benefit once a year, and
I
I've
see.
been helping with the benefit, and my
Right.
cousin would buy a table, and we
Oh,
would go and
nice.
see Neil Young play for 300 people.
Oh, cool.
Or
Yeah.
or them this Chili Peppers in,
Right,
in
right.
his backyard
Mhm,
or
mhm.
something.
Wow,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I like that they're
Yeah,
doing
I do too.
this. It's
He's in a movie
wonderful.
now. I think he's starting an acting career.
Yeah.
There's a movie he's in.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name.
That's that movie. Slim and Queen or
Oh yeah,
something,
Queen and
right?
Slim.
Queen and
Yeah,
Slim.
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen the
I
movie
haven't
yet.
either, but I actually bought it the other day, and I
Yeah,
plan to
I heard
watch it.
it's
And
good.
I did too.
Yeah.
I hear great things
He
about
was
it.
also in Point Break back in the
Oh, was he?
day.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
realize
Catherine
that.
Bigelow in the first one.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
and
Oh, I didn't
Anthony.
realize
They were
that.
some rough kind of surfer dudes on
Uh
the
huh.
beach or
Oh, I didn't
something.
know that. Okay. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
I know that movie, but I didn't realize he's in it. Yeah.
That was a good one too. Do you
Hmm.
like movies?
I love movies. Actually, I've done a little bit of scoring. I
Yeah, I
did
was
one like more than 20 years ago, a movie called Love Jones. Really great
okay.
writer and director, Ted Witcher, who's
Uh-huh.
also from Chicago. Used to come and see me play with my band in
No
Chicago
way.
and said, one day I want you to do a score for me. And
How was
he
that
got his deal. I
experience?
loved it. I loved it. I've done two. I did one last year with I think what I realize is that if you in both cases, both directors are musicians,
Hmm.
and so they know how to speak the language,
Hmm.
which apparently, from what I'm told from other composers,
Hmm.
is a really a gold mine.
Oh yeah.
If they can speak to you in a language that musicians understand, then it makes the job a lot
Because
easier.
all the arcs of the
Yeah,
storyline and all of
yeah,
that has so
yeah.
but how was that for you
I loved
to
it.
apply
I
your language
love it.
then to the
I love it
image?
because I love words and books
Hmm.
and film and storytelling generally.
So it's just another
And so it
element
is,
that
yeah,
comes in.
it's like using music to help a person who has a vision of a story that he
Hmm.
wants to tell is very, very exciting to me. I did a movie called The Obituary of Tunde Johnson, and
Hmm.
actually it got it was very well received at the
Hmm.
Toronto Film Festival. Um, but I loved working with this director, Ali Leroy.
Hmm.
Um, it's a really interesting story, and
What is it about?
it is
Is it
this.
out?
It is not out yet.
Ah,
I
okay,
think
maybe
they're
he is.
yeah. It's not out yet, but
Okay.
it's done well in a few film festivals,
Hmm.
and there's a little buzz. Hopefully it'll be out
Ooh,
this year at some point.
cool. Yeah, I'm fascinated by scoring because it's
Mm.
really such a different
It
form
is.
of
It is.
creating music
It is. It really
because you
is.
have that.
Yeah, you are there to support the story and
Hmm.
to move the story or to to affect it in some way. And so that is, I loved it. I really loved it both times. I really loved it.
That's
Yeah. And
cool.
I'd love to do more.
And then now that you have, done the movie, you can go back on the road so it never gets boring,
Yeah,
never
no,
gets old.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. And in a way, it's funny because I was thinking to myself, last year, I guess it was last year this time, I was thinking to myself, I would love to have a career where because I studied acting for a long time
Did you?
in Los Angeles, here in Los Angeles and in New York when I lived in New York. And so that's something that I'm also interested in, but I haven't had an agent for many years, so I've not done anything.
Who'd you study with?
I studied with a few different people. A guy named Tony Greco, who
Uh-huh.
was really good. I studied with two other people.
Here in LA or New York?
One here in LA, which was the Meisner method,
Hmm.
and then I studied with someone who, what is her name? I've forgotten her name. That was so long ago in New York,
Hmm.
but she was teaching.
Was it Uta Hagen?
It was not. No, no, no.
Oh,
It
because
wasn't
that's where I
somebody quite.
studied.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, Sweat, and that's like,
And
she's
Herbert
huge.
Berghoff, they had the HB
Wow.
studio on Bank Street. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I
So,
was like in my early 20s and I was
yeah.
way too shy, but I was
Uh,
dancing. So I
uh-huh.
thought, oh, it wouldn't hurt to take
Yeah.
acting
No, no,
classes
no.
because we did put on musicals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, no, this is not for me. I was like, I couldn't deal with all the rejection
Oh,
and
yeah.
all of that. I
Yeah.
think I would be like dead by now.
Yeah, no, no, no. It helped me to be a musician because it's,
Mhm.
you go on an audition. If you don't get it, it's like, yeah, but I got a gig next week, so I'm cool.
Yeah.
And so it took a little bit of the pressure off in that respect.
But would you revisit that idea?
Oh, yeah. I went and started studying voice acting at the Radio Ranch in Sherman Oaks.
Uh-huh.
So I've been doing that, on and off the last couple of years.
Yeah,
so,
but that voice needs to be heard.
yeah.
Okay, you agents out there. Daryl.
Yeah.
Daryl's looking.
Somebody. Yeah. You
That's
know,
amazing.
yeah, I love all
Would you
that
go
stuff.
back to class
Yeah, I would. Yeah, yeah.
after the guitar building? So you have a
You
full
know,
schedule.
yeah, no, it's like, but all of those things I think are like, like I said, Miles, I went to Miles's apartment once and he said, "Do you ever draw?" And I said, "No, my brother really got that gift."
Hmm.
And he said, "Well, just draw this. Find something in that magazine and draw it." And I drew it, and then he said, "Well, paint it. Now just paint it." So I painted it, and he kind of jokingly looked at it and said, "Give me my paints back." But he told me that day, he said, "Darryl, one art helps the other."
Yeah.
He said, "Cook. Get into cooking, get into drawing, get into art. All of these things, photography, all of these things help inform the other things that you do." And I think that that's absolutely true.
I cannot agree more. It's like, I am the jack of all trades. Like always done different jobs. I've never stuck with one
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
And of course, you always think the grass is greener on the other side, and you think, wow, how did that guy?
Yeah.
It's like music, and
Hmm.
why did you give up on this and that? And I think it has to be such a deep passion, but
Right.
it doesn't mean that you're one-dimensional. That
No.
you also have the other crafts that you cultivate. And for
Absolutely.
me, in a way, we're all artists.
Yeah. No. 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 I
We
agree.
have life is like to
Yeah. Yeah.
navigate through life is an art
Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah. We
by
were talking about
itself in
improvisation.
itself.
Yeah. When you
Yeah,
step out of your front door in the
yeah,
morning, you better be able to improvise in
right.
order to make your way through stuff. So
Yeah,
absolutely, I think we all are
yeah. And
artists.
I feel the same way with cooking. Like I started cooking when I was 10 or 12. I
Mm.
never used recipes or a cookbook, but people say, "Wow, you're such a great cook."
Yeah.
It's my art.
Yeah. No.
Oh,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
It's
and I
wonderful.
actually also pick up a pen and do drawings
Oh
and
no,
stuff
that's
or go to
great.
life
Yeah.
painting classes,
That's great.
but I would never show anybody. It's just for me,
No, and
you
that,
know?
and some things are that I agree.
Yeah,
Sometimes you're just doing it for your own edification.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What other art form would you be interested in picking up?
Oh, I think
If there's a
if I could
time left in the
snap
day,
if I could snap my fingers, painting is something that
painting,
photography,
yeah.
painting. Yeah, but even in music, there's still all this other stuff that I like to do. I mean, other instruments and singing and
What other instrument,
other
for
kind of music.
example? Piano?
Well, piano. I'm really a lousy piano player. I'm more like a carpenter uses a hammer. That's the way I'm a piano. I use it to build stuff,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not much of a piano player. I have always I dream about being a tenor saxophone player.
Really?
Yeah, I dream about that a little bit.
Well, the
And
dream
then
is the subconscious, so
yeah,
listen to
yeah.
it.
No. Bobby Keys gave me a saxophone before he passed away.
Wow.
He gave me a saxophone.
That's
A beautiful
amazing. You
horn.
have Bobby Keys saxophone.
I have a saxophone that Bobby Keys gave
What
me.
an
Yeah,
honor.
yeah, it is.
What a great
Yeah,
honor. I
yeah,
love the saxophone.
yeah.
It's a very difficult instrument.
Yeah, particularly for a person who can look down at an instrument and know where I am.
Yes.
So an instrument where, first of all, you have to breathe
Yeah.
into, and at some point, breathe into your lungs and breathe out, and fingerings that don't really say to you in the way that a guitar does.
Yeah.
So it's a little like trying to find a note and trying to find the right breath. It can be a little bit daunting.
But that's a challenge to find these new
Yeah.
pathways in the brain to
Right,
connect.
exactly,
You
which
know?
which we're being told
Yeah.
help keep us young,
Yeah.
and keep us sharp.
I
So,
try to pick up something. I picked up guitar when I was in my mid 40s.
yeah.
I played the
Oh,
piano when I was a kid.
last year this time I was trying to learn how to speak German.
And
I
how's
was
that
sitting
going?
here. I'm sitting here now, thinking to myself, "Can you remember one phrase?
It's
Not one phrase is
It's
coming
so
to mind."
difficult.
It is tough.
It's a
It
it's a
really is
tough.
tough.
I'm glad that I have it as my mother
Yeah,
tongue.
yeah.
So English second
Yeah.
language and
But
French.
not impossible. I mean,
No.
it's not impossible. People do it.
And when you travel or whatever, you can listen to it all the
Mhm.
time or spend time there.
Yeah, yeah,
And then a
Yeah.
girlfriend that
Yeah.
always helps.
Yeah.
Like I learned French like that.
yeah, yeah. The problem with my girlfriend is that she speaks
Perfect English.
well, not perfect, very good English,
Yeah.
but I pay so much attention to really trying to make sure that at least she speaks English better and better,
Yeah.
that we don't spend much time on me.
But you know what's also good? Watching movies in the
That's true.
language.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
even when you know the movie already,
Yeah.
then you know the
Yeah,
narrative.
that's right.
And
That's, you're absolutely right. There are certain things that
I
keep
learned a
coming out.
lot by watching
Yeah,
movies in the
I've heard people
language.
say that. Yeah, and Japanese cooking, I think, is something that I would really love to. Love
Yeah.
to go to Japan and live there for a few years and really learn how to, how to.
Where in Japan would you go? Tokyo?
I love Tokyo, but
Hmm.
that or some small town, someplace have some guy teaching me how to make soba for a year and
Mm.
teaching how a guy teaching me how to how to cut sushi and.
Have you looked into it?
I actually had a soba lesson a number of years ago.
In Japan?
Yeah, in Japan. And met a guy when we were in New York last summer, who has told me, when you come to Japan, you'll come to my house and I will begin teaching you. That kind of thing takes
Was
a
it
long
hard?
time. The soba, oh yeah, it's more than a notion. It's one of those things that you have to do kind of every day for some years
Wow.
to
Who would
really,
have
really get
thought
right. To
that,
really
huh?
get right. I mean, just the kneading of the dough. There's a certain thing. It's like a chrysanthemum, where you have these lines in the dough based on the way that you knead it, and it's an art form. It is,
Yeah.
and you can't just walk into it. You got to really kind of know what you're doing,
I
and you
think,
have to have some experience.
yeah, Japanese
Hmm.
food or cuisine in
Hmm.
general is such a highly elevated
It
art
is.
form. It's
I agree.
incredible.
I agree.
It's and you know what we know here is just like a
Yeah.
little part of it.
No, it's interesting because I got these Japanese friends. They come here. I take
Mhm.
them to my place,
Mhm.
and they're like, "Man, that's really, really good sushi." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know the good sushi places in LA and in New York. It's incredible." A friend of mine, I was in Tokyo. She took me to Ginza Sushi Co.
Mhm.
in Tokyo. And I don't eat sushi in Tokyo that often because
Mhm.
I have pretty good sushi here. So
Mhm.
I eat all the other
Mhm.
Japanese cuisines when I'm there. But she took me and I realized, wait a minute. I'm thinking that the sushi in the States is good. And it is.
Mhm.
In many places it's good. But this was a whole nother world.
Mhm.
This was it was really something.
Different level.
Yeah, a whole nother level. Yeah.
Plus, also they have so many different fish that we don't get
Right,
because if
true.
once you ship them or fly them over here, you know, it's
And
not like that.
and you go to sushi school here for a year.
Mm-hmm.
They go to sushi school there for 10 years.
10.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean probably a little bit less as time has passed and as it's become more important, more uh, popular.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean I read a book called The Story of Sushi,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to the history, and it goes also to people who are studying
Mm-hmm.
here. And you have to wash rice for months. Literally, people said my hands have been cold for the last 6 months because I wash rice all day and all night in Japanese
Wow.
restaurants. You gotta, it's a real, you gotta,
Yeah.
do
Pay your
yeah,
dues.
absolutely,
Yeah. So, yeah, you can't take the elevator
yeah,
always. You have to take the steps.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
that's really like building a solid foundation.
yeah, yeah,
Without that, everything is kind of phony,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you can
And I mean, and
wing
other
it.
people are doing other interesting things with
Mm.
that, but to again, it's like with for many years, if you didn't go and study French cooking,
Mm-hmm.
there was you were missing some stuff,
And the
and
techniques
yes,
and all of
exactly,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and some people are able to cite, so just like there are some musicians that never study formally,
Uh-huh.
who are incredible musicians. Some people are autodidacts.
Or gifted,
Yeah, or just
extremely
gifted,
gifted.
can teach themselves these things.
Yeah.
But I think for a person like me, yeah, no, I'd like to go to the source and really
Me too.
understand.
Even when I did like, snowboarding, for example, you want to
Yeah,
switch from skiing to
yeah,
snowboarding. I went to camp and I learned it
mm-hmm,
properly and
yeah,
I like it. And then once you have the basics down, then you
yeah,
start
yeah.
playing
No,
with it,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I
That's
just, hmm
awesome. So
I
when
just.
is that documentary scheduled to come out?
Well, we don't have a solid
Release or
release
the
date yet, but because we're actually still working on it. We've been working on it for a few years now, but hopefully the filming will be done in the next few months.
and what the guy you said was a producer with Oliver Stone?
Yeah, yeah, he
My
co-produced
friend
it.
is Oliver Stone's editor.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
He's,
Yeah.
yeah, he was on my podcast.
Oh, really? Wonderful.
Yeah, he's
Wonderful.
working on Avatar right
I
now.
would. Oh, wow. I would love to send me a link to so I can check out some of the
Of course, yeah.
other interviews. I'd love to.
Yeah, it's also so this guy so he wants to do a documentary first, but then a movie.
Well, we don't know if whether that'll happen or
Okay.
not, but yeah.
But you're having fun doing the documentary.
Yeah, it is both fun and nerve-wracking to see
Yeah.
yourself.
Same
It's
here.
tough.
But I was like, if it wouldn't frighten me, it wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah,
So I said,
true.
I don't know, because like I said, I love documentaries, I love biographies, memoirs.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I had to do it.
Yeah, I
I
just
wanna
bought this
learn.
this book of quotes. It's something you said just a moment ago reminded me of it. Your all of the things that you are wanting and wishing for in life are just outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
So it definitely is something that is tough for me. I'm real critical of my playing, my singing, my appearance, and all of those things. And so it's tough for me. And but I have resigned myself to, okay, just keep moving forward. Just keep
Yeah.
moving forward. Try to get better, get better, get better.
Yeah, and believe in yourself, and not about, because we're so concerned about the perception of
That's true.
others,
That is true. That
which
is true. Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
be eliminated in
Yeah,
that process.
I do have that too. But it's
Everybody
funny because
does.
mostly I just want to be good at the things that I'm attempting to do.
Yeah.
That is probably, I don't know if maybe that's a perfectionist. That's just what, maybe
Yeah,
that's.
it's a personality thing, but it's also, you have accomplished that in the craft of music. So of course you have set the bar high.
That's funny because even when you say that, I think to myself, I'm in the act of accomplishing that in music. I still feel like there's all this stuff that I want to learn. There's all this more that I want to do. So I don't, I can't really rest,
Yeah.
too much. I have to kind of
But
keep
they
moving.
also say the job is never done.
No, it's true.
And once you kind of have like make peace with that,
Yeah, exactly.
it is something where you can say, okay,
Yeah,
it is nothing. There is no
Yeah.
goal like
Right.
like finish line
No,
where
no.
I'm running through. There's only
Exactly.
one finish line we have, and that's when it's over.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This is, I keep telling myself about records.
This is
and
it, right?
This is a document for now.
Yes.
Hopefully there will be another document for when when I've gotten better. And
Yeah.
I've learned more.
Yeah, and I think it's important to stay awake, because really some people, they realize late in life, as we get older, we contemplate death more, and we look back at what we've done, and it's a blessing if you come to that awakening earlier in life, because this is it,
You're absolutely right.
right? So that's awesome. What was that?
We have a few noises. Somebody's air conditioner just kicked on. I heard an airplane earlier. Living in the big city.
What time do we have? Ooh. Are you good with your meter?
I'm good for 6 more minutes
Oh.
with my meter. We could go on, but
No, I don't want you to get a ticket.
yeah.
But
and they give me 2 now because I don't have.
But you can come back if you
Yeah, I
want.
would love to. I would
Yeah?
love to. It's been great talking to you.
You
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much also for making the time. I was so honored when you
Oh,
when
no.
you said yes. I was like, I can't believe it. Darryl is coming. I can't
Yeah,
believe it.
well.
And then I had this piece of paper, and I have to take notes. I need to ask him this, and then I was like, fuck it.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean,
But you don't want to forget anything.
no,
but
yeah.
again, I want to be in the moment, and
Right,
I
no,
want to
exactly,
kind
yeah.
of,
No, I thought
hear what you're saying.
I think we did great. I think
yeah.
we did great. Absolutely.
Yeah. Should we do a break, and then he can feed the meter?
Awesome, guys.
Do you want to keep it running?
I don't know.
I think so. We have like 9 hours on these cards, right?
9 hours on one card? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, it was really, really nice.
Is this not
Okay.
the most
So
gorgeous
it's not-
engineer you've ever seen in your life?
I'm not.
She can teach you a thing or two about acting.
Yeah, wow.
an
Are you
actor.
studying? Are you?
I'm an actress, yeah.
Oh, wow.
But it's so cool that you're into like going into acting as well. Like,
Well, I did more before. I did more a few years, a number of years ago. Little parts, little walk-on stuff, not nothing really big. But it's something that again, it's storytelling. I really love.
Do you think it's similar to playing music?
There are some similarities. Yeah, I did a movie. I did like a scene in a movie with a scene with Tupac Shakur and
Ooh.
Tim Roth in
Which
this movie
movie was
called
that?
Gridlocked.
Oh, yeah.
And it was interesting being on the set that day and, having the director come and say, okay, great, let's do another take. But this time, don't back up out of the camera, out of camera shot, And so, okay, now, and then I'm, doing it, I'm realizing, okay, I've got to let him in because he's starting to speak to me and I'm, the scene is with him, but also, and it reminded me a little bit of studio work where you have to, the next take, okay, remember to put in this element and remember, yeah, and while you're doing that, you have to try to be in the moment and come off as if you're not, just repeating some lines and stuff. So I really love the challenge of that.
Amazing.
You're so creative in so many levels. That's
Mm.
awesome.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to learn more. I'm trying to.
Do you still practice music every day?
Not every day. I'm practicing something every day.
Mm.
I don't say that I play the bass every day, but yeah, I sing. I try to sing every day. I try to play a little guitar every day. Sit at the piano.
Awesome.
It's amazing.
So singing also.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that
Wow.
get that iron in the fire because
Is your solo stuff with you singing?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, that's part of the story. It's part of telling the story. It's like, I could get somebody else to sing, but they'd be singing my words.
Yeah.
So that doesn't
And you
really
have a
make
great
sense.
voice, though.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Have you recorded,
Yeah,
like,
recorded
and,
some
and,
stuff,
and you like yourself? Because you said you were
I'm
being
working on it.
critical.
I'm working on it.
By the way, talking about voice, are you in touch with with Bernard?
Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
are?
yeah,
How
yeah,
is he
yeah.
doing?
He's doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
And Lisa's no longer with the
She's not in the band,
Stones,
but
she's
yeah,
doing
she's
great
doing great. Yeah,
solo
she's doing
stuff.
wonderful. Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I noticed the first time I think it was on Desert Trip, and they were the new
Depending
girl.
on what happens with this whole
Yeah.
virus thing, I'm going to do a gig that we're going to film
yeah?
early next month, April 2nd, at Vitello's in Studio City.
Will you let me know?
I will.
That would
I
be
will.
awesome.
Yeah,
I would love
yeah,
that.
yeah. So-
I saw also, I think, was it on your Wikipedia or something, of all the people you've played with, that you also played with John Beasley?
Oh yeah,
at
we have
some
a
time.
band basically together.
He's
Yeah,
great,
yeah,
huh?
yeah.
My friend,
Yeah, he's very, very talented.
I met him through my friend Rami, who is the keyboard player of the Foo Fighters.
Oh really?
And it's his birthday today. Shout out to Rami.
Oh, is it?
And so we go on bike rides in Venice all the
Oh,
time.
nice,
And then
nice.
all of a sudden, this John was on
Yeah.
the bike ride.
Yeah,
and
right.
invited us
He lives in Venice. Yeah.
to his house and his
Yeah.
lovely wife
Yeah,
who
no,
works
no.
for Doctors Without Borders.
Yes,
and
yes, she's
super
a great lady.
nice. Yeah.
Great lady. Yeah.
And then next thing I saw, he was playing Disney Hall.
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
he does a lot of stuff. He's like the White House.
Yeah.
Jazz Dave with the
Yeah.
White. He's involved with a lot of stuff. Does a lot of stuff with Herbie Hancock, and
Yeah.
he's got his own big band, Monkestra.
Yeah. Super
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, he's really talented. Yeah. We did a record together. Unfortunately, the drummer, who was a little like a soul jazz trio, the drummer passed away a couple of years ago. Ndugu Chancellor passed away. So we actually had to get back to that. It's been a few years since we recorded.
Yeah.
I guess I should dash.
Yeah. But it's so crazy with the virus, like the concerts.
Yeah.
Oh,
Everything is-
did you take a picture?